the ground! Now! Get the hell down!
Hands where I can see you!
Open the register!
Meantime, East Providence police investigating an armed holdup at a gas station.
During a shocking gas station robbery in Las Vegas, Mike Tyson unexpectedly stepped in and saved the day. What happened next left everyone utterly speechless. It all started on a Tuesday evening at a gas station at the southwestern end of Las Vegas City. It was like every other day, and no one knew this ordinary spot would become the scene of an extraordinary encounter. The cashier had been enduring another boring shift. He leaned lazily against the counter, scrolling through his phone, wishing the hours would pass quicker. It had been a slow evening. Just a couple of regulars stopped by for snacks and sodas. His eyelids grew heavier with every passing moment. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. The man who entered wore a black hoodie with a nose mask pulled tightly around his face to unveil his identity. Immediately, he entered Tom Williams, who happens to be the cashier on duty, and noticed something strange in the posture of the intruder that made him uneasy. The man's hands were stuffed deep in his pockets, and he moved with purpose, his sneakers squeaking faintly against the floor. The company had a policy to treat every customer as necessary. Tom greeted every customer in a very respectful tone, but something was fishy with the man. He didn't respond to Tom's greetings. Instead, he hesitated, glancing around the store as if assessing something. His eyes darted toward the surveillance cameras mounted in the corners, and then he went directly to the counter. Tom's unease grew into alarm. "Hey man, how can I help you?" he asked again, but his voice was already trembling. After Tom's second greeting, the man slowly moved closer to the cashier, and in a very harsh and compelling voice, he asked Tom to give him all the money. Tom looked up from the register. He almost lost his mind momentarily. Tom noticed the man had a pistol, but there was something about his demeanor, something wild and unpredictable that disturbed Tom. The man's clothes were worn, his face unshaven. He was clearly down on his luck, perhaps pushed to this desperate act by circumstances he couldn't control. Tom's first instinct was to comply. His mind raced, calculating the best course of action. He glanced at the security camera in the corner of the room, hoping that anyone was watching, but he knew it was unlikely. The station was far enough, and any help would take too long to arrive. Without a word, Tom opened the cash register and slowly began to hand over the bills. His hands were shaking not from fear, but from the overwhelming sense of helplessness. This wasn't the way he imagined his night would go. The man seemed to be in a rush, his eyes glancing around the room as if expecting someone to show up at any moment. "Faster!" the man barked, his voice growing more agitated. Tom complied, trying to remain calm, but his heart pounded. Tom started begging him to leave. While he was trying to persuade him to go, the man pointed his pistol at Tom's head, its barrel shining under the fluorescent lights. It wasn't a big gun, but it made Tom freeze where he stood. The color drained from his face as adrenaline surged through his veins. "Don't move!" the man hissed, his voice low and frantic. He waved the gun in Tom's direction before tossing a duffel bag onto the counter. "Put the money in the bag. All of it. Now!" Tom nodded shakily, his hands fumbling with the cash register. He couldn't take his eyes off the gun. Time seemed to stretch, each second dragging on forever. There were two other customers inside the aisles. Luckily, they saw what was happening, but the gunman was too busy to notice other people were ducking behind some furniture. The two customers froze, and their faces turned pale. One of them was a young woman holding a bag of chips. She ducked behind a shelf, peering out with wide eyes. The other was an older man who stood glued to a spot. The man had a water bottle as if it might shield him. The robber's agitation grew. "Hurry up!" he barked, slamming a hand on the counter. The sound made Tom flinch, throwing the register even further and dropping a handful of coins onto the floor. They scattered noisily. The metallic clatter broke the tense silence. Don't shoot," Tom stammered, finally pulling the cash drawer open. He began stuffing bills into the duffel bag, his hands shaking so violently that a few bills fell to the floor. The robber didn't seem to care. His eyes glazed nervously toward the door, then back to Tom, as though expecting the cops to burst in at any moment. While the man threatened Tom noticed a car driving into the gas station. But who was the mysterious driver, and what did he want? Could it be the cops or a partner of the mysterious robber? The identity of the visitor will shock you. It was Mike Tyson. This was Tyson's favorite car service station, and he was there for a scheduled engine check. Tyson felt something was wrong immediately when he entered the gas station. At first, there was no one to welcome him as the usual station practitioner. Aside from that, Mike also noticed that the silence was strange. There were no movements or signs of human activity. He decided to check the office area. When he walked into the cashier's section, the armed robber turned and stared at him. Mike gave him a cold stare right in the face. At this point, the robber realized his plan was about to fail. Tom was relieved, as his prayers had been answered. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The air felt heavy, and Tom could hardly breathe as the scene unfolded. The robber attempted to leave the office, but Mike Tyson's imposing figure was too much for him to dare. To everyone's amazement, Tyson whispered in a low but steady voice, "Hey, man." The robber didn't answer. He stood there, still in shock, unable to process what was happening. Tyson didn't flinch or move to stop the robber. Instead, he took another step forward. Mike told him that he understood what was going on. He explained to the robber that he had been in a similar place, having done things he wasn't proud of, and shared that he understood how it felt to be pushed to one's limits and feel cornered with no options. The robber's grip on the counter loosened slightly. He stared at Tyson, still struggling to process the scene before him. The robber expected Tyson to confront him aggressively, but he was surprised to feel empathy in his words and actions. Taking another step closer, Mike, now just a few feet away, gently told the man that he didn't have to continue, that he was better than this, and that there was always another way. He revealed his own experiences of making mistakes and finding redemption. The man began to breathe faster as his thoughts raced. He couldn't believe it was happening for real, standing before Mike Tyson, who was urging him to put down the gun and choose a different path. The story is about to get more interesting. Keep watching. "Look," Tyson continued, "I'm not here to judge you, but I know something about second chances. You don't have to let your life spiral any further. If you need help, I know where you can get it. I know people who can guide you out of this mess and give you the chance to start over." The robber's hands trembled. His eyes welled up with tears, a flood of emotions hitting him all at once. The weight of his decision, the pressure building for weeks and months, came crashing down on him. He had never expected this. He had never anticipated kindness from someone like Mike Tyson. Tyson didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply stood there, offering his understanding and his support. "You don't have to do this tonight," Tyson repeated, his voice full of sincerity. "There's always another choice." Tyson took another step forward. The movement was slow, deliberate, and unthreatening, yet it sent a clear message. Tyson wasn't backing down. The robber's eyes raced around the room, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. Behind him, Tom, the cashier, stood frozen, clutching the edge of the counter as though it might offer some form of protection. "You need money," Tyson said, his tone thoughtful. "But this ain't the way to get it, man. You're just making it worse for yourself." The robber's face twisted with frustration. "You don't know me," he shouted, pointing his gun in Tyson's direction. His voice cracked, betraying his fear. "You don't know what I've been through. I don't have a choice." Tyson stopped just a few feet away, his massive body towering over the man. He crossed his arms over his chest, his expression unreadable. "Don't talk to me about choices," Tyson said quietly, his voice a little raised now. "You think you're the only one who's been through tough times? I've been broke, homeless, locked up. I've been at rock bottom, and I know what it's like to feel like you don't have a way out. But this?" He gestured to the gun. "This ain't the answer." The room was silent again. Even the customers hiding behind the shelves were now peeking out, unable to keep their eyes away from the unbelievable scene before them. Something shocked everyone present. Tyson spoke with authority and empathy. It was as though he could see through the robber, past the gun and the hoodie, and into the man himself. For a moment, it seemed the robber might lower the weapon. His shoulders sagged slightly, and his eyes wavered. But then, remembering his predicament, he straightened up and tightened his grip on the gun. "Stay back," he yelled, his voice rising in panic. "I'll do it, I swear." Tyson didn't flinch. Instead, he uncrossed his arms and took another step forward. Now, he was close enough for the robber to land punches all over the robber's face, but he didn't do it. "You ain't gonna shoot me," Tyson said, calm but firm. "You don't want to hurt nobody. I can see it in your eyes." The robber's breathing became more heavy. His hands shook so badly now that the gun wavered in the air, no longer pointing directly at anyone. "I just need money," he shouted. But his voice was now shaky. Tyson seized the moment. Moving with the speed and precision that had made him a legend, he grabbed the gun. His grip was like iron, unyielding, and the weapon was snatched from the robber's hands before he could react. Within a few seconds, Tyson had disarmed the man without much struggle. The robber stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock. Tyson tossed the gun onto the counter, far out of reach, and fixed the man with a steady gaze. "It's over," Tyson said. The robber sank to his knees, his head hanging low. The weight of his actions seemed to crash down on him all at once. The tension in the room vanished, replaced with a sigh of relief from everyone present. But for Tyson, the moment wasn't about victory. It was about redemption. Redemption for himself and the robber. It was at this moment something happened that left the robber in total shock. There was a sound of police sirens that grew louder and closer with each ticking second. As the police sirens wailed in the distance, Tyson knelt beside the man and touched his shoulder. "You've got a choice now," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Don't waste it." The sound of approaching police sirens continues to fill the air. The gas station felt quiet and calm. Tyson crouched beside the defeated robber, his hand resting gently but firmly on the man's shoulder. There was no victory in his expression, only a quiet resolve. He knew the moment wasn't just about stopping a crime and what came next. The robber introduced himself as Trevor. Tyson sat Trevor on the ground, his face buried in his hands. The weight of his actions had finally caught up with him, and the adrenaline that had fueled his desperate attempt had drained away. Now, all that was left was a broken man in a crumpled hoodie, overwhelmed by regret. "You okay, man?" Tyson asked, his voice softer now. The question wasn't just about Trevor's physical state. It was an opening, an invitation for the young man to speak his truth. Trevor shook his head without looking up. "No," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I screwed up. I just didn't know what else to do." Tyson nodded slowly, his gaze steady and empathetic. "I understand you," he said. "Life can corner you sometimes, making you feel like you have no options. But trust me, there's always another way. You just gotta believe in it." After hearing that, the man finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and brimming with tears. "You don't get it," he said, his voice cracking. "My mom's sick. Bills are piling up. I've been trying to get work, but no one's hiring." "What was I supposed to do?" he asked with tears rolling down his face. On hearing this, Tyson sighed deeply. He did understand far more than Trevor could imagine. He had been there, faced with impossible choices, pushed to his limits by circumstances beyond his control. But he also knew Trevor's chosen path would only worsen things. Tyson asked firmly, "Do you think this will help your mother? If you're locked up, who will care for her? You're better than this. I can see it." Before Trevor could reply, the front door burst open, and two police officers entered, their hands instinctively moving toward their holstered weapons. The sight of Tyson standing in the middle of the room made them hesitate. They exchanged a glance, clearly recognizing the former heavyweight champion. "Is everything all right here?" one officer asked cautiously. Tyson raised his hand in a calming gesture. "We're fine, officer," he replied. "No one is hurt. Just a man who made a poor decision." The officers approached cautiously, their eyes running between Tyson and Trevor. "Sir," the second officer said, addressing Tyson, "we'll need to take statements from everyone, and he gestured to Trevor, "will need to come with us." Trevor's shoulders slumped further, and he offered no resistance as the officers helped him to his feet. Tyson watched as they handcuffed the young man. But as Trevor was led towards the door, Tyson stepped forward and placed a hand on one officer's arm, asking if he could see him for 30 seconds. Although the officer was initially reluctant, he eventually agreed to talk. According to accounts, the details of their discussion were not audible. But afterward, Tyson turned to the man, reassuring him that it was not the end for him. In a very emotional tone, Tyson said, "You made a mistake, but you can fix it. Start fresh and do better." With tears streaming down the man's face, he whispered a thank, although it was not audible. As the officers led Trevor outside, the remaining customers and the cashier cautiously emerged from their hiding spots, their faces full of relief and awe. Tom stepped forward, his hands still shaking slightly. "Mr. Tyson," he said, his voice trembling, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved us." Tyson waved a hand dismissively. "It's not about thanks," he replied. "Just do me a favor next time you see someone struggling. Try to help them before they reach this point. We all need a little help sometimes." The words hung in the air, striking a chord with everyone present. Tyson turned to leave, but the woman said, "You're a hero, Mike," as he walked towards the door. What he did after the woman's words will shock you. After hearing the woman praising him, Tyson paused to fake a faint smile. In response to the woman's comment, he disagreed with her calling him a great man. He told everyone at the scene he was just a man trying to do the right thing. The morning after his arrest, Trevor sat in a holding cell staring at the floor. His mind replayed the events in a loop. The panic, the fight, and Tyson's words. Despite the hopelessness of his situation, he felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, someone had seen him not as a failure, but as capable of improving. A court-appointed lawyer visited him later that day, explaining the charges and possible consequences. Armed robbery was a severe crime, but Trevor's lack of a criminal record and the absence of violence worked in his favor. More surprisingly, Tyson himself had reached out to offer support. But that is not all. At the end of Trevor's trial, he was given a choice: jail time or a rehabilitation program coupled with community service. Tyson's intervention had been instrumental in securing this option, and Trevor seized it with gratitude. The program focused on life skills, job training, and addressing the root causes of his desperation. As he began his journey, Trevor found himself haunted but inspired by Tyson's words. "You can fix it," Tyson told him with assurance. And although it wouldn't be easy, Trevor was determined to prove him right. For Tyson, the encounter at the gas station became a chance for an introspection. The streets, the struggles, the desperation he had seen all before, both in his youth and the people he met along the way. Trevor's story wasn't so surprising, but it reminded him of how easily life could spiral out of control without the proper guidance. While Trevor was at the rehabilitation home, Tyson reached out to people in his network of mentors, nonprofit leaders, and former athletes who shared his vision. Together, they began laying the groundwork for an initiative to support struggling individuals like Trevor. In addition, he made sure to provide his mother, who was in hospital, with all she needed to get better.